How to build silent confidence without saying a word. You have been in rooms where the loudest person was not the most powerful one. You already know this. You have felt it in your body before your mind could name it. Someone walks in, says almost nothing, and the room adjusts around them. Not because they demanded it, not because they intimidated anyone, because something in their stillness did the asking for them. That is silent confidence. And if you are here, it is because you want the real thing, not the performance, not the version you rehearse in the car before you walk into the building, the kind that does not need a stage or an audience, or a single word to prove it exists. You are not here because you lack something. You are here because you have spent too long in rooms that rewarded volume over substance, and you started to wonder if your quietness was a flaw. It is not. Your quietness is not the problem. The problem is a world that mistakes noise for certainty and speed for strength. And when you spend enough time in that world, you start to believe the thing they keep telling you. Speak up. Be visible. Make yourself heard. As if silence were the same as absence. As if choosing not to speak were the same as having nothing to say. What we are going to build in this video is an architecture, not a performance, not a technique you pull out when the pressure gets high enough. A way of carrying yourself so quietly rooted that the noise of other people's opinions simply cannot reach the foundation. This is for the people who think deeply, who feel deeply, and who have been told, implicitly or explicitly, that their way of being in the world is not enough. It is more than enough. And by the end of this, you will understand why, and you will know how to build it without saying a word. The noise that killed your confidence. Let's start with the noise that killed your confidence. Because if you want to build silent confidence without saying a word, you first have to understand what stole your confidence through sound. And once you see where the theft happened, you can stop handing over the keys. The performance trap. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that confidence looks like someone who walks into a room and fills it, who speaks first, who speaks loudest, who takes up space without apology. And maybe you tried to become that person. You rehearsed what you would say in the shower. You forced yourself to speak up in meetings even when your voice was shaking. You practiced eye contact in the mirror. You told yourself that confidence was just on the other side of your discomfort. And maybe it worked, for a moment, in specific rooms, with specific people, but it never felt like you. It felt like a costume you put on every morning and took off every night. And the exhaustion of wearing it was quieter than the confidence it was supposed to produce. The sociologist Irving Goffman gave this a framework that still holds. He called it the presentation of self in everyday life. His argument was simple and devastating. We are all performing roles on a stage, and the person behind the mask is often exhausted by the act itself. His research at the University of Pennsylvania showed that people who rely on performed confidence that depends on external validation and visible proof, experience higher cortisol levels and faster emotional burnout than those whose confidence is internally anchored. The performance did not make you confident, it made you tired. And tired people in costumes are not confident, they are just visible. The comparison engine. Another one that sneaks in. It is not just the noise you make, it is the noise you absorb. Every time you scroll past someone who seems more certain than you, more put together, more loud in their conviction, your brain does something it was never designed to do at this speed. It compares. The psychologist Leon Festinger gave this a name in 1954, social comparison theory. He argued that humans have an innate drive to evaluate themselves, and when no objective measure exists, we look at the people around us. But Festinger was writing about your village, your street, your workplace. He never imagined a world where you could compare yourself to 10,000 people before breakfast, and another 10,000 before lunch. Think about this for a moment. Your brain has a comparison engine that was calibrated for a world of 50 people. You now ask it to process millions. And it tries. It tries so hard. Every face you scroll past, every voice you hear in a podcast, every confident person on a stage, your brain files them into the same system it uses to evaluate whether you are safe in your tribe. Are they above me or below me? Do they threaten my position? Am I falling behind? The noise of comparison is not just distracting, it is architecturally destructive. It builds a confidence that depends on being better than someone else, which means it collapses the moment someone better walks in. I want you to ask yourself a question that demands an honest answer. Whether you call it God, or the universe, or simply the deep intelligence of a life honestly examined, the principle remains the same. Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt truly confident, without checking if someone else was less confident first? If that question stings, that is the point. That sting is the sound of a foundation that was never yours. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Galatians, "Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves to someone else." Galatians 6:4-5. Paul was not giving a productivity tip. He was identifying a structural flaw in the human operating system. When your confidence is built on comparison, it is not confidence, it is ranking. And ranking always depends on who is in the room. Whether you call it God or the universe, or simply the deep intelligence of a life honestly examined, the principle remains the same. You were not built to be depleted. You were built to be whole. The reset. Here is what helps. For the next 7 days, before you open any social media app in the morning, ask yourself one question. Whose voice am I about to let into my head? And did I invite it? This is not about quitting social media. It is not about going off grid or deleting your accounts. It is about interrupting the automatic pipeline of comparison before it erodes what you built overnight. Because here is what most people do not realize. The comparison does not start when you feel bad about yourself. It starts the moment you open the app without intention. The erosion begins before the feeling. By the time you notice the weight, the damage is already done. The psychologist Albert Bandura spent decades at Stanford studying what he called self-efficacy, the belief in your own capacity to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific outcomes. Notice what is missing from that definition. Other people, opinions, applause, none of it. Self-efficacy is a private contract. It is the belief that you can do the thing, whether or not anyone is watching, whether or not anyone claps, whether or not anyone even notices. And here's the thing about that contract. If you keep letting other people's voices sign it, it is not your contract anymore. Real confidence is a private agreement you make with yourself. Silent confidence is simply the version where you stop performing the agreement and start living inside it. And building that kind of confidence without saying a word starts with recognizing every voice that is not yours and choosing not to build on it. Stillness, the first pillar of silent confidence. We arrive now at stillness, the first pillar of how to build silent confidence without saying a word. Because before you can build something that does not move, you must learn what it means to stop moving when everything around you insists you should. The panic to respond. Imagine this. You are in a meeting. 7 people around a table. The conversation is moving fast. Someone you respect, or someone you report to, says something dismissive about an idea you spent a week developing. They do not attack you directly. They do not need to. The implication is enough. Your idea is simplified, reduced, made small in a single sentence. And in that moment, something rises in your chest. The urgency to respond, to correct, to defend. Your mouth opens before your mind has finished evaluating. You speak, not because you chose to, because the silence felt unbearable. It is not weakness. It is biology. The amygdala, the small almond-shaped structure deep in your brain, fires a threat signal faster than your prefrontal cortex can evaluate whether the threat is real. Dr. Joseph Ledoux at New York University mapped this pathway extensively. His research showed that the amygdala can trigger a full-body stress response in less than 100 milliseconds, long before your rational mind has a chance to ask, is this actually dangerous? The panic to respond is not a character flaw. It is a survival mechanism that served your ancestors well on the savannah. But here is the problem. In the modern world, 99% of the threats that trigger your amygdala are social, not physical. And social threats do not require fight or flight. They require stillness. The practice of the pause. Here is what helps. It is not complicated, but it will feel impossible at first. When you feel the urgency to respond, do not yet. Count one breath in, count one breath out. That is the entire protocol. The Navy SEALs use a variation of this called box breathing. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford has discussed how controlled breathing directly modulates the autonomic nervous system, shifting you from sympathetic arousal, fight or flight, to parasympathetic control, rest and clarity. You do not need to do the full box breath in the middle of a conversation. People will think you are performing something. You need one breath, one pause, a single inhale that takes 3 seconds. That is enough. Because here is what that single breath does. It creates a gap between the stimulus and your response. And that gap is where silent confidence lives. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl wrote about this gap with an authority that no textbook can match. He said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Frankl was not speaking theoretically. He was describing what he observed in the concentration camps, where every external freedom had been stripped away, but the freedom to choose how to respond remained. The person who can pause before reacting is no longer reacting. They are choosing, and choosing is the beginning of power. The psalmist wrote, "Be still and know." Psalm 46:10. Not be still and speak, not be still and explain, be still and know. The knowing comes after the stillness, not before it. Whether you call it God or the universe, or simply the deep intelligence of a life honestly examined, the principle remains the same. You were not built to be depleted. You were built to be whole. What stillness communicates? Here is one. Many people do not notice about stillness. They think it is passive. They think the person who does not respond is the person who cannot. They mistake the pause for emptiness. But consider this. In every room you have ever been in, the person who speaks second speaks with more weight. The person who lets the silence settle before adding to it. Their words land differently, not louder, deeper. The researcher Dr. Cameron Anderson at UC Berkeley studied status in groups and found that people who speak less, but with intention, are consistently perceived as more competent and more influential than those who speak more. The data was unambiguous. Volume did not predict influence, intention did. Stillness does not communicate absence, it communicates control. It says, I have measured this moment, and I have decided what it deserves. That decision, the act of choosing rather than being swept along, that is how you build silent confidence without saying a word. Think about the most confident person you have ever been around. Not the loudest. The most confident. Did they fill every silence? Did they rush to respond? Did they need to have the last word? Or was there something about the way they let a moment breathe that told you more about their strength than any sentence could? That quality is not a gift. It is a practice. And it starts with one breath. Ask yourself, when was the last time you let a moment breathe, instead of rushing to fill it with your voice? That breath is where the first pillar stands. Drop where you are watching from in the comments. Sometimes knowing someone in your own city or your own time zone is carrying the same invisible weight makes it a little easier to bear. Restraint, the second pillar of silent confidence. We arrive now at restraint, the second pillar of how to build silent confidence without saying a word, because knowing when not to speak is a different kind of strength than knowing what to say, and it is the one most people never learn. The urge to explain. You have done this. We all have. Someone misunderstands you, and you immediately launch into an explanation. You overclarify. You add context they did not ask for. You repeat yourself in slightly different words, hoping this time the meaning will land. You give 3 examples when one would have done. You qualify, you caveat, you soften, and by the end of it, you have said so much that the original point is buried under all the padding you built around it. But here is what is actually happening beneath the surface. The urge to explain is not about communication, it is about control. You are trying to manage how someone sees you. You are trying to ensure there is no gap between your intention and their interpretation. And the harder you try, the more it communicates the opposite of what you intend. The psychologist Mark Leary at Duke University researched this extensively through the lens of self-presentation theory. He found that people who over-explain are consistently perceived as less confident, less trustworthy, and less knowledgeable than those who say less with more precision. The data was counterintuitive but clear. More words did not equal more clarity. More words equaled more doubt. Every unnecessary word you add to clarify your position does not strengthen it. It dilutes it. It is like adding water to paint. The color does not become more vivid. It becomes thinner, and people can see the canvas through it. The discipline of enough. Try this. The next time someone misunderstands you, say what you mean once, clearly, then stop. Let the silence do the rest. This will feel like stepping off a cliff. Your brain will scream at you to add one more sentence, just one more example, just one more clarification. Do not. Let the sentence stand on its own. Let the person across from you sit with it. Let them do the work of understanding, instead of you doing the work of preventing their misunderstanding. This is not about being cold. It is about trusting that your words, when chosen carefully, are enough. The discipline of enough is the practice of saying what is necessary and then releasing the need to manage the outcome. And this is where silent confidence becomes visible, because the person who can state their position and then sit in the discomfort of not knowing whether it was accepted, that person is not performing confidence. They are living it. The discomfort of not over-explaining is the feeling of your confidence becoming real. Ryan Holiday writes about this in Stillness Is the Key, drawing from Stoic philosophy that stretches back 2,000 years. The Stoics did not see restraint as suppression. They saw it as precision. A sculptor does not add clay to make the statue. They remove what does not belong. Your words work the same way. Proverbs 17:27 reads, "A person of understanding is even-tempered, and one who has knowledge restrains their words." The scripture does not say the person has nothing to say. It says the person has enough understanding to say less. Whether you call it God, or the universe, or simply the deep intelligence of a life honestly examined, the principle remains the same. You were not built to be depleted. You were built to be whole. The people who test your restraint, and then there are the people who will test this, deliberately or not. There will be people who push, who provoke, who say things designed to make you react. They want the explanation. They want the defense. They want the visible crack in your composure, because your reaction confirms their power over you. It tells them that their words reached something inside you and that something moved. Consider a moment you have probably lived through. You are at a family gathering or a work dinner. Someone makes a comment. It is not outright hostile. It is the kind of comment that is designed to be deniable. The kind where, if you react, they can say you are being too sensitive. It is a test, and most people fail it, not because they are weak, because they have never been taught that the test exists, let alone that restraint is the answer. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl wrote about this with the weight of lived experience that few can match. In the concentration camps, he observed that the last of human freedoms, the one that could never be taken, was the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. His insight was not theoretical. It was forged in the most extreme conditions of human suffering, and it applies here too, in the meeting room, at the dinner table, in the text message that wants a reaction. When someone provokes you, your restraint is not weakness. It is the last freedom they cannot touch. The person who does not react to provocation is the person who cannot be controlled by it. That is the second pillar. And every time you choose restraint over reaction, you are building silent confidence without saying a word. Ask yourself, whose provocation have you been answering that never deserved a response in the first place? We are going to look next at how silent confidence becomes physical, how it enters your body and changes the way people read you before you ever open your mouth. Before we look at the body language of silent confidence, roughly 80% of people watching this have not subscribed yet, and that matters. It helps this reach others who are carrying the same weight quietly, and it tells us this kind of content is worth continuing to build. Now let's move on to the body language of silent confidence. The body language of someone who has nothing to prove. We arrive now at the body language of someone who has nothing to prove, because building silent confidence without saying a word means it must speak through your body first. And learning its physical language changes how every room receives you before you ever decide to open your mouth. Start here. Watch someone who is truly confident enter a room, not someone who is performing confidence, someone who is carrying it. They do not rush, they do not shrink, they do not scan for the nearest exit or the most important person. They simply arrive. Their shoulders sit where shoulders were designed to sit, not pulled back in a forced military stance, not rolled forward in protective collapse, but settled, at ease. Their chin is not raised in defiance. It is level, neutral, at home. There is a quality to the way they occupy their own body that communicates something before they ever say a word, and that quality is not rehearsed. It is the physical expression of an internal state. The researcher Amy Cuddy at Harvard, despite the later controversy around her specific power-posing findings, opened a door that matters. She showed that body language is not just a reflection of internal state, it is a participant in it. Your posture does not merely express how you feel, it shapes how you feel. The newer research from Dr. Eric Pieper at San Francisco State University confirms this direction with more rigor. His studies demonstrated that sitting in an upright position increases alertness and self-perception of confidence, while slumped posture decreases both within as little as 2 minutes, not after weeks of practice. Within 2 minutes. Your body is not just carrying your confidence, it is building it or dismantling it, one position at a time. 1 Samuel 16:7 reads, "People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." The scripture is about judgment, but it contains a quieter truth. People will read your body before they hear your words, and the way you carry yourself, the architecture of your posture, is the first sentence you speak in every room. Make it a sentence you would stand behind. Whether you call it God or the universe, or simply the deep intelligence of a life honestly examined, the principle remains the same. You were not built to be depleted. You were built to be whole. The slow down. Here is what helps. The next time you reach for your phone, do it 5% slower. The next time you walk to a meeting, do not hurry. The next time someone asks you a question, let 1 full second pass before you answer. Confident people move slower, not theatrical slow, not performative slow, just unhurried. They do not rush to fill silence. They do not scramble to answer before the question has finished landing. They let a beat pass. Then they respond. There is a man you may have seen in a conference room once. He was not the most senior person in the room. He was not the most credentialed. But when he moved, people noticed. Not because his movements were dramatic, because they were deliberate. When he reached for his coffee, it was a complete motion. When he turned to face someone who had asked a question, he turned his whole body. Not a tense half-turn, a full rotation, as if the person who had spoken was worth his full attention. That quality, the quality of someone who is not rushing through their own life, is something people feel before they can name it. The neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman has discussed how slowing physical movement signals safety to your own nervous system. When you move quickly, your brain interprets it as urgency, which triggers a mild stress response. When you move deliberately, your brain reads it as control, and control, even the physical kind, is the cousin of confidence. You will be surprised how much authority lives in that single second. The pause before you answer, the unhurried reach, the walk that says, "I am not late for my own life." Ask yourself, when was the last time you moved through a room like you belonged there, instead of moving through it like you were trying to leave it quickly? Eye contact without aggression. And then there is the eyes. Most people get this wrong in one of two directions. They either avoid eye contact entirely, which communicates retreat, or they hold it too hard, which communicates challenge. Both are performances. Both are trying to say something. Silent confidence lives in the space between. It is the gaze that says, "I see you. I am not afraid of you, and I do not need to dominate you." There is a difference between looking at someone and looking into them. The first is social. The second is territorial. Silent confidence does not look into. It looks at. Steady, relaxed, present, but not searching. The researcher Dr. Nora Murphy at Loyola Marymount University published a fascinating study on what she called power cues. She found that people who maintained steady but relaxed eye contact were judged as more intelligent and more competent, even when their actual performance was identical to those who looked away. The eyes communicate what words often cannot. A person who can hold your gaze without tightening, without calculating, without needing to look away or look harder, that person has arrived at something most people spend their whole lives performing. That person has nothing to prove. Ask yourself, when was the last time you held someone's gaze without searching their face for approval? That searchlessness is the body keeping the promise of building silent confidence without saying a word. If this gave you language for something you have been carrying silently, subscribe. Most people watching haven't yet, and that single act tells us this quiet work matters enough to keep building. Now let's move on to when silence becomes your strongest response. When silence becomes your strongest response. This next one hits harder than most, because building silent confidence without saying a word means there are moments where the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all. And knowing which moments those are changes everything. The disrespect test. Imagine this. You are in a meeting, 10 people around the table. A colleague speaks over you, not subtly. They interrupt your point, restate it as their own, and the room moves on. And in that moment, something rises in your chest. The urgency to correct, to say, "That was my point," to reclaim what was taken. And every cell in your body screams, "Defend yourself, say something. Do not let them get away with it." If you say nothing, they will think you agreed. If you say nothing, they will do it again. If you say nothing, you are complicit in your own erasure. But here is the counterintuitive truth. The person who responds to disrespect with visible anger has already lost the exchange. Not because anger is wrong, not because the feeling is invalid, but because anger is visible. It shows the person who disrespected you exactly where your wires are. It gives them a map. Daniel Goleman, the psychologist who brought emotional intelligence into mainstream understanding, writes about this in his framework for emotional self-regulation. He identifies the amygdala hijack, the moment when your emotional brain overrides your rational brain and takes control of your behavior. You feel the flush, the tightness in your jaw, the heat in your chest. That is the hijack, and the person who can recognize it and choose not to act on it does not just preserve their dignity, they preserve their position. They remain the person in the room who has not been moved by someone else's provocation. That stillness, in the face of disrespect, is not weakness. It is the most unnerving thing a provocateur will ever encounter. The power of unanswered provocation. Here is what happens when you do not respond to provocation. The provoker is left with their own noise, no echo, no reflection, no confirmation that their words reached you. And this is deeply unsettling for someone who relies on reaction to feel powerful. They said the thing to get a response, and you gave them nothing. Not anger, not agreement, not even disagreement, just the absence of participation in their narrative. The strategist Robert Greene writes about this in The 48 Laws of Power, noting that the most dangerous people in any room are not the ones who react. They are the ones who observe. They are the ones who let the other person fill the silence, and then watch them become uncomfortable in the space they created. Silence forces the other person to sit with their own statement, unchallenged, unsupported, alone. And statements that are not fed by reaction tend to collapse under their own weight. Think about the last time someone said something sharp to you and you did not respond. Did they repeat it? Did they try to draw you in? Did they shift in their seat? Most people cannot tolerate the silence they created. They will fill it themselves. They will soften. They will rephrase. They will move on. Your silence does not just protect you. It reveals them. Ecclesiastes 3:7 reminds us there is a time to be silent and a time to speak. The wisdom is not in knowing that both exist. It is in knowing which time you are in, whether you call it God or the universe, or simply the deep intelligence of a life honestly examined. The principle remains the same. You were not built to be depleted. You were built to be whole. This is the third pillar, silence as social defense. The deliberate choice to withhold your energy from something that does not deserve it. And every time you make that choice, you are building silent confidence without saying a word. When to break the silence. The final one is the nuance, because silent confidence is not silence at all costs. There are moments when speaking is the most confident thing you can do. The difference is intention. When you speak from silence, because you have chosen to, not because you were provoked into it, your words carry a weight that no amount of volume can replicate. There is a kind of person you have met once or twice in your life. They are quiet most of the time. They listen. They observe. They let the room talk. And then, at the exact right moment, they say one sentence. And the room stops. Not because they shouted, because the sentence was so precisely placed and so long in arriving that it had the weight of every silence that came before it. That is what silent confidence sounds like when it finally speaks. The key is knowing the difference between silence that serves you and silence that protects someone else's behavior. Ask yourself, when was the last time you stayed quiet? Not because you were choosing stillness, but because you were afraid of the consequence of speaking. That is not silent confidence. That is silent compliance. And the line between them is the most important line you will ever learn to walk. Silent confidence says, I can be quiet, and I can also speak, and no one gets to decide which one I do, but me. That is the third pillar. That is the architecture: stillness, restraint, and silence. 3 pillars, 1 foundation, and not a single one of them requires you to say a word. Closing reflection. You came into this video carrying a question that most people never ask out loud. How do I build silent confidence without saying a word? And maybe you have been carrying that question for longer than you realize. Maybe it formed the first time someone spoke over you and you let them. Maybe it formed the first time you rehearsed a response in your head and then decided not to say it, and later wondered if that was strength or fear. Maybe it formed so slowly that you cannot even locate its origin anymore. But the question has been there, quiet, persistent, unanswered. And maybe the answer was never about becoming louder. Maybe it was never about finding your voice in the way the world keeps telling you to. Maybe it was about becoming so rooted in who you are that the noise simply stops reaching you. Not because you built a wall, because you built a foundation deep enough that the wind cannot move it. Stillness taught you that the pause is where power begins, that the breath between the stimulus and your response, that single breath, is the distance between reacting and choosing. And choosing is where silent confidence starts. Every time you pause instead of flinch, you are building. Restraint taught you that less is not weakness. It is precision, that the sculptor removes what does not belong, that the discipline of enough, saying what you mean once and then letting it stand, is the practice of trusting your own words enough to stop protecting them with padding and explanation and qualification. Every time you stop over-explaining, you are building. And silence taught you that the most powerful response in any room is the one you choose, not the one you are forced into. That unanswered provocation collapses under its own weight. That the person who can hold silence when the room demands a reaction, that person has something the room cannot take away. Proverbs 15:1 reads, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." The softest answer of all is no answer, not because you are avoiding, because you are choosing, because you have weighed the moment and decided that your energy is too valuable to spend on someone who has not earned it. Whether you call it God or the universe, or simply the deep intelligence of a life honestly examined, the principle remains the same. You were not built to be depleted. You were built to be whole. None of this is easy. Building silent confidence is not a switch you flip. It is a practice, a daily quiet return to the part of you that knows, without needing anyone else to confirm it. The rooms will still be loud. The comparisons will still come. The provocations will still arrive. The dismissive colleague will still speak over you. The family member will still test your edges. The world will still reward the people who fill every silence with their voice. But you will be different. Not because you learned a technique, not because you memorized a script, because you remembered something the noise tried to make you forget. You were already enough. Before the performance, before the explanation, before the defense, before the rehearsal in the car, before the eye contact you practiced in the mirror, before the meeting where you spoke up just to prove you could, you were already enough. And the proof is not in the volume. It is in the stillness. It is in the restraint. It is in the silence that no one could pry out of you, because it was never theirs to take. This is Quiet Grind Daily, where self-improvers reset. Calm mind, consistent action. If life has felt loud lately, you are not alone. And if this helped you slow things down, even slightly, that is enough. If someone came to mind while you were listening, maybe share this with them quietly, not to correct them, just to offer perspective. If you found value here, a like or a quiet comment helps this space grow. It signals to the algorithm that there are still people who prefer depth over noise. And if you want more conversations like this, calm, steady, thoughtful, consider subscribing. No pressure, just an invitation. This is Quiet Grind Daily, where self-improvers reset, calm mind, consistent action. I will see you in the next quiet moment.